JJ McCarthy, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Ricky Pearsall are all headed into their second NFL season. We discuss why they could have a big impact in fantasy football in 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we're going to discuss three players that are headed into their second season that are all kind of sleepers in terms of fantasy football. Now, JJ McCarthy and Ricky Pearsall are two of the three guys we're going to talk about. They're definitely sleepers when it comes to fantasy this upcoming year. Marvin Harrison Jr., on the other hand, isn't a sleeper, but he had a very disappointing first year. So we have to figure out if he's going to bounce back and he's worth one of those earlier, top 4, 5 round picks this year. So we're going to get through all of that today. Let's start with JJ McCarthy because there's some news around him right now about, he hasn't been told yet if he's going to be the starter. There's still those lingering rumors around Aaron Rodgers to the Vikings, right? But if it is JJ McCarthy who's the starter, which I fully expect it to be, I think we have to start considering him as a fantasy asset. And right now he's ranked 27th among quarterbacks in consensus rankings. Do you think that's too low for the starting quarterback of the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell?
Yeah, I think it's too low. Just ignoring the fact that he's going to inherit some very good weapons here already with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, pretty good offensive line that they upgraded in the interior in the offseason. So there's everything there. And the Kevin O'Connell system has kept producing really good fantasy quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold. Kirk Cousins had his best fantasy seasons there. Partly he was playing with Jefferson, and that really helped, of course. And then you went to Sam Darnold, who kind of picked up where Cousins left off, was delivering balls downfield, had his first 30-plus touchdown season of his career, easily a breakout year compared to what else he had done in other stops as backup. So we didn't expect that at all. We thought, okay, once they didn't have McCarthy and transitioning from Cousins, there would be a bit of a drop-off here with the production, but it didn't turn out to be the case as the Vikings still executed this offense. And part of it is, again, the supporting cast is really good. And that helps guys like Baker Mayfield, Jared Goff as well. When you have these type of receivers and blocking and schemer, you're typically going to have a good season. And look, we know what we think we might get from Jane Daniels and Caleb Williams. Brock Bowers broke out, Bucky Irving, Malik Neighbors, and Brian Thomas Jr. These are more of the guys that we're not 100% sure about. It could go really either way. But I'm tending to lean on McCarthy just putting it together. I don't know if he's going to be a stud that you're going to put in like Daniels basically in his rookie year in year 2. But I think he's going to have some value to stream in 2 QB leagues. I think putting him at 27 is kind of an insult here. I mean, he has got physical talent. I think we're worried about the unknown quantity, but the big known quantity is the Vikings offense is very good. And I don't know how you can rank somebody outside of the QB2s, right? That's where he's at QB 27. I think that's really low. Maybe there's concerns if he's indeed going to be the starter. But if he is, everything says there's a path to real numbers there. And he can run a little bit. He can throw downfield. He's going to put up these numbers. I think some people are still going back to Michigan where he didn't have to throw as much and the volume wasn't there. And he didn't put up those big numbers. But I think that changes in the NFL here.
Yeah, so now since 2021, Kevin O'Connell has worked with 3 different quarterbacks who have all finished as a top 9 quarterback in fantasy. So Sam Darnold, quarterback 9 in 2024 with 35 passing touchdowns, by far the best season of his career. And then you had Kirk Cousins as quarterback 8 in points per game in 2023 before tearing his ACL or Achilles. And then quarterback 8 in 2022. That was O'Connell's first season as the head coach for the Vikings. And then when O'Connell was with the Rams as OC, Matthew Stafford was the quarterback 6 that year in 2021. All 3 of these guys are not like great fantasy assets away from Kevin O'Connell, right? We haven't seen many great fantasy seasons from Stafford. That was the first good one from Darnold, and Cousins without Kevin O'Connell has been not nearly as good of a fantasy asset prior to him and then after him. So I do think JJ McCarthy, if he's a starter, we have to consider him. He has some mobility too, right? It's not like Jaden Daniels. So we're not saying that he can have that type of year, because without that rushing ability, you're just not going to do that. But he can have a Bo Nix type year, and 27th is far too low, right? And I'm trying to look at these guys here. I would much rather take a shot on JJ McCarthy than a Tua Tagovailoa, where you know exactly what you're going to get, right? And it's not great production. I have a question for you. JJ McCarthy or Drake May?
Yeah, I think you have to say, based on the weapons, you got to go with McCarthy, and the history is there, right? We're not sure how Josh McDaniels is going to work with Drake May year two, already an offensive mindset change. I don't know if Stephon Diggs moves the needle all that much to say that the Patriots have a reliable passing game. Well, I think the Vikings already have that established. Like Jefferson's taken care of, Addison and Hawkinson. Those three alone can be a path to McCarthy producing here with pretty good weapons. And look, he might even have more upside than a Bryce Young. Like, we're trying to figure out his weapons.
Yeah.
And I think you just forget about, I think McCarthy, because he didn't play last year, because he didn't put up like big passing numbers while in college, while they were winning a national championship and running game and defense, you forget that he's a very good downfield passer, can make all the throws. And I think it speaks a little bit to the fact that the Vikings haven't really worried too much. I mean, they didn't keep Daniel Jones. They let Darnold go. They let Nick Mullins go. So they didn't really say we need to have a backup contingency plan. They seem to be cooling on Rodgers. So that says the Vikings organization, who's done a great job of recognizing offensive talent and getting the production out of these guys, if they think, look, McCarthy is the man, then we should believe in them a little bit based on O'Connell's track record. And look, the best thing about O'Connell's, you talk about Stafford, Cousins, Darnold, these guys are all pocket passers. So McCarthy gives you a little bit of running. It's not going to be a big time running, but it could be some Mayfield-like production on the ground. Like, he's got that much athleticism. So if you get a little bit of that and some of the production that you get in the passing game downfield to these weapons, then it should add up to a pretty decent season. Again, I'm not saying he's going to go top 12 because he doesn't have that running the way that Daniels does. But again, 15 in there, 16, I think it could definitely be there. So maybe he's going about 10 to 12 spots lower than he should be.
Yeah, I think in super flex leagues or 2 quarterback leagues, he is a great guy to go after for your second quarterback, because he gives you high upside. And I do just think him in this offense, it gives you a pretty safe floor as well. Now, talking about these weapons that he has, Justin Jefferson, he's going to be fine, right? It doesn't matter what quarterback's throwing to him. That doesn't matter. But Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, I think, are very interesting ones here to see how they're impacted by this quarterback change, right? Especially Hawkinson coming back. Now he's a full year removed from the ACL tear. He came back in the second half of the year, didn't score any touchdowns, a little bit limited in his production. Jordan Addison had a few big games in there, but it was inconsistent over the year. Does JJ McCarthy help Hawkinson or Addison more from last year?
I think it's Hawkinson, because he's looking at him, he's really a rookie, and rookies tend to have the security blanket of the tight end. That was a player that was important to him in Michigan, right? Colston Loveland. So he trusted the tight end quite a bit in that offense. I know they had some big players like Roman Wilson, but he might look at that as Justin Jefferson for him and the go-to guy downfield. So I think Hawkinson's going to be a big part of what they do at tight end. I think he probably would have been a bigger factor had he been healthy for the beginning and throughout the season last year. And again, 0 touchdowns. We talked about that. That's going to go up. He's going to get targeted in the red zone. I also think they could run a little bit more and also throw a few more checkdowns here to Aaron Jones. I think it was important. Again, if you look at what they did in the offseason, they got Jordan Mason and improved their run blocking. So it says they're going to run a little bit more, take pressure off JJ McCarthy, but that can also help him by setting up the play action deep throws and keep Hawkinson on the field in those situations as well. So I do think this helps Hawkinson, hurts Addison, Justin Jefferson should be fine. Again, for Jefferson, the Studley numbers are going to be based on, does he score enough touchdowns?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have to get on to Marvin Harrison Jr. because I'm really interested in this conversation. I think he might be the hardest guy to rank at this moment, especially among the wide receivers for sure. So we're going to discuss and figure out where we want to put him for 2025 and our feelings about him right after a quick break. Today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite event should not be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I just used this app about 2 days ago to buy me some Astros tickets going to the game on Wednesday. Very, very excited. And I use them for many reasons, but I always find the best prices on the app for sure. And then I get to see the view of my seat before I buy. So I'm not surprised when I get there with bad seats or bad view. It takes seconds to buy the tickets, 2 taps and you're set. And then they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantees, and even job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKDOWNNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Vinny, let's continue discussing these second-year players that they have potential to be very impactful for fantasy next year, but there's question marks around them. So we already discussed JJ McCarthy. I want to move on to Marvin Harrison Jr. here. He was a wide receiver 32 in a half-point PPR or half-point leagues last year. He has a wide receiver 20 ranking right now in consensus ranks. He was going very, very early in drafts last year. We really liked him, right? Coming out of school, it looked like he was just going to thrive in an offense with Kyler Murray and be the clear number one target on this team. That didn't come to fruition. He was the second target on the team behind Trey McBride with 116 targets. McBride had 147. That 116 targets turned into just 885 yards and 8 touchdowns. Now, 10 years ago would have been a great season for a rookie, right? But now it feels very lackluster, especially with what we were hoping for. They haven't made changes, though. Drew Petzing is still the OC. Kyler Murray still the quarterback, right? They didn't add any other weapons or take away many weapons. So what are your thoughts on Marvin Harrison? Like, what needs to change? What will change to make him a good fantasy asset?
Yeah, I mean, his numbers were very similar to his dad's rookie season, and we know where his dad went. He took off, but he also had a quarterback named Peyton Manning, and that was also a historic run with those two delivering as one of the best connections in NFL history. Like, I don't know if that connection has been developed yet with Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray, look, everyone's been fickle on him. I think Cardinals fans are getting antsy. They want to see a little bit more of his ceiling here. And he was disappointing last year, right? James Conner was by far the most reliable fantasy asset. On top of Trey McBride, he didn't score, which was a problematic thing for McBride. And I think that was a little bit on Murray as well, not getting McBride in the red zone until late in the season. He finally broke that drought. So I think some of this is on Kyler Murray. I mean, we thought it might be Murray and DeAndre Hopkins part 2 immediately. Well, I think we just had too high of expectations at the same time. Maybe we should have noticed that Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. were a little bit more ready to produce in their particular offenses. So Harrison came in with a lot of hype. And I don't know if his name was Marvin Smith something. Would he have gotten all that hype, right? The fact that he was Marvin Harrison Jr., we hyped him a lot, but then we were on the wrong rookie wide receiver because you had Brian Thomas and Neighbors finish in the top 12, depending on your scoring system. So what you're seeing here from 32 to 20 is a whole jump up in a wide receiver, right? If you're looking at 12-team leagues, that's saying he's going to be a whole wide receiver better in fantasy, jump from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 2. Now, that seems pretty reasonable, but the question is, can he get higher than that? Can he get the 15 to 12 range at wide receiver? I think he has the potential. He did show us the touchdowns with 8. He just has to be a little bit more consistent, not drop the ball, get more efficiency out of his targets from Kyler Murray. And I think they have to do a better job of scheming him open in this offense. Sometimes they just forgot about him and they just like, oh, he's going to be double teamed. That's a problem, right? He's the clear number one. He was a rookie. He wasn't ready to handle all that heat. So I don't know what you're going to get. I think he's got a lot of upside, but I think I would be careful about drafting. I think wide receiver 20 is fair. That means he falls into that range. Get ready for fantasy buzz term, post-hype sleeper, right? He's a post-hype sleeper because he was hyped so much. Like he was going in the top 10 among wide receivers. Can he go at that level? I think that's a bit risky to go in, especially when you look at Neighbors and Thomas and some of these younger receivers that will crack the top 12. But when I look at Harrison, look, the talent is all there. Physically, he can do it. I think the touchdowns say that he could break double digits. So I think he can creep there, but I think it might be more dependent on the touchdowns and big plays than with the volume of receptions and yards.
Yeah, it's so hard to know, is it the scheme or is it a problem with Marvin Harrison Jr.? And maybe it's both, right? Because only caught 53% of his targets, which is really bad, right? And some of that was drops, but Next Gen Stats has him for 5 drops, so that's not a huge part of it. A huge part of it is not getting separation. He averaged just 2.0 yards per separation per target last year. That was the worst among wide receivers with 100 targets by a good chunk too. It's like most of these guys were pretty close within decimals, like 0.1, but Marvin Harrison Jr. was at 2.0. The next closest guy was George Pickens at 2.3. So a good chunk. And then the tight window targets, 35% of his targets were a tight window, contested catch. Again, by far the most at 35%. The next closest was Terry McLaurin at 28%. So it definitely, he just didn't have much space. Now, maybe that's because his route running needs fix. His technique needs fix off the line. I also do think, though, the scheme is just not great for him. Drew Petzing is not getting creative enough to get him open. And then also what I found really interesting is that he was averaging 13.6 air yards per target. That was the 5th highest among wide receivers with 100 targets. So like too deep down the field, maybe too, right? Get him some shorter targets, let him work after the catch. But maybe that could also that has the impact on his struggles last year. So a lot of things that can be fixed. It's just there's not the changes made where it's going to make sense that it's fixed unless Marvin Harrison Jr. puts in like insane work this year and kind of changes his technique, or maybe Petzing gets more creative. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like sometimes now in the NFL, the size can be a detriment to a wide receiver. Maybe it's just like too big, where some of these quicker, smaller corners that are on him that can stay with him. I mean, you see a lot of that throughout the league. When you look at the ideal size for a wide receiver, something like 5'11" to 6'1", somewhere in that range, right? Where it's that sneaky quickness that you can get open after the catch. And maybe they have to do that. Like DeAndre Hopkins, remember, he ran a lot of get me open routes, right? Short to intermediate, and Murray would throw them. And again, if Murray's having trouble connecting with him deep, or they're just not being able to scheme that up well, then they got to make an adjustment and try to get this guy more manageable targets. He can make big plays after the catch, and maybe you just ramp up his red zone usage as well. So again, he's going to be very volatile. I cannot tell you exactly what you're going to get. I don't think he'll get wide receiver 32. I also don't think you're going to get wide receiver 12. So probably wide receiver 20 is splitting the difference and putting him there. Look, I'm hopeful, but if he has another shaky season, I think I'm going to be off him for sure, because then we know it's the Marvin Harrison issue.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I have one question for you, because we just talked about Jordan Addison or Marvin Harrison Jr. if you're on the board, because they're going to be going probably pretty close to each other.
Yeah, I would go with Harrison only because he has less maybe to fight with targets at this very moment, right? I mean, it's him and McBride pretty much. I mean, they did add some people, but they're all lesser type receivers. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't believe in Greg Dortch all that much. So those type of receivers, whatever. But like, I think the Vikings have more potential for passing to go around. But I think Harrison is the number one guy. I think I would trust him a little bit more than Addison.
Very good. All right. I agree with you there, Marvin Harrison, because at least he does have the potential to be the number one target on his team. Jordan Addison could be the 3rd target on his team. So very different. We have one more guy we want to discuss. It's Ricky Pearsall, and I'm getting way too high on him. So you might have to cool me down on him. Maybe I'm just being a homer as a 49ers fan. We'll discuss his fantasy outlook for 2025 right after a quick break. All right, moving on to Ricky Pearsall. Entering his 2nd season, he missed most of the first half of the season last year after getting shot in the chest in the offseason, right, in the summer. And then he comes back and plays. A miracle that he was fine. He comes back, makes his NFL debut in week 7. Didn't do much. Had a good game in week 10 with a longer touchdown, but limited playing time, limited action, limited targets. And then week 17 was really his big breakout game with Brock Purdy. He had the 10 targets, 141 yards, and a touchdown. And then Brock Purdy didn't play in week 18, but Ricky Pearsall finished off his rookie season with another nice game with 69 yards and a touchdown on 8 targets with Josh Dobbs. I think Pearsall showed flashes towards the end of the year that he can be a good starting wide receiver in this league, that he can get the targets. And then also it was just for him to even come back at all and be productive at all as a rookie, I think showed a lot. And a year removed from that injury, I think will be huge for him.
Yeah, the key for him to getting real wide receiver 3 fantasy relevance, and at this point, he's ranked as the last wide receiver 4 on the board, half point PPR. And I think, again, that's trying to split the difference. Is he going to be wide receiver 5? Is he going to be the wide receiver 3? Usually, this is what these early rankings look like, right? The split decision on these players. Now, the question really, again, is he going to be able to pick up a lot of those targets that Deebo Samuel has vacated on this team? When you look at Deebo and then a few from Chris Conley, a few from Jordan Mason, there's not a lot of vacated targets on this team, 100 plus still available. And then you're not sure if Juwan Jennings is going to get 113 targets. Again, a lot of that was the product, obviously, of Brandon Ayuk not being available for much of the season. He was under 50 targets. So, Ayuk is going to get a good chunk of that. They're going to cut into those targets from Jennings and then Samuel. So you're basically looking at, if you throw some of the targets that Jennings usually doesn't get away, you're looking at probably 150 targets or so that are out there for this team to disperse with Ayuk and Pearsall. So when you look at that, that gives him some potential right away. And maybe the key is, again, can he be more than just a downfield big play guy? We know he's got speed and can do that. But I think they need a little bit more balance, right? Because Ayuk can do that as well, get downfield. So we haven't seen too much chemistry yet with Brock Purdy, so that's a question mark. But again, we look at some of these other receivers, and I thought about Rome Odunze for this exercise, but I thought he has a little bit more clear path to where he's going to be on his team. But like with Pearsall, like a lot of things have to fall into place. I want to see that Purdy deal done so we know what we're doing here. With that passing game, again, it really comes down to displacing Jennings as a key target on this team, get into that 3 with George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk, and I think he has the potential to do that.
The reason why I really like Ricky Pearsall is because I don't know when Brandon Ayuk will be back. I mean, there's trade rumors. We'll see if they can get that done. But I mean, it wasn't just an ACL tear for Brandon Ayuk. He tore all his LCL, MCL, ACL. It was a bad knee injury in the middle of the season. I very much doubt he's ready to go to start the year. He may not come back until the middle of the season. And who knows how slowly he has to come back. So I do expect Pearsall to be the top wide receiver target on the team. It's also a reason why I love George Kittle so much, because I expect him to be the focal point of the offense, and then Pearsall to be the top wide receiver, because it can't be Juwan Jennings again, right? It worked for that one game where he was fantastic, but Jennings can't be a wide receiver 1 on a team. So I do expect Pearsall to go into the season as the wide receiver 1, get a lot of targets from Brock Purdy. You made a good point, though, about Brock Purdy's contract, because Purdy's not going to go out there and be working with his wide receivers until he gets his contract. And they really need to work on this because they didn't get the whole summer last year with Pearsall injured. So they need this time to make this, to build on this chemistry. And the longer that the 49ers drag out this contract extension, the less time that they have to work out together. So that is key. And the 49ers are known to continue to drag out contract negotiations deep into training camp. Hopefully they don't do that with the quarterback, but obviously if that happens, I'm going to have to get lower on Pearsall. But if they can get this contract done shortly, then I'm going to be pretty high on him.
Yeah, that's the key, because Purdy has great chemistry, with Kittle and Ayuk. I mean, they just have all clicked pretty well. Purdy with the deep ball. I mean, that's why you saw some of his numbers decline, because he was such a good deep ball thrower, with Ayuk being on the receiving end of many of them 2 years ago. So that was the thing. And George Kittle, he was the main field stretcher down the middle of the field when you didn't have that situation there. But when you also look at it, the 49ers used a first-round pick on Pearsall. Let's not forget that. I mean, he was drafted up there with Harrison and Thomas and Neighbors not that far after those guys went off the board. So I think they probably foresaw what they were going to do, right? They saw, okay, Deebo, we're going to pay Ayuk, and then we're going to have to get rid of Deebo. he's declining, and if someone can take him in a trade, we'll do it. And then came the Commanders. So like, okay, now we can reassess what we want to do with Pearsall in this offense. Now, Juwan Jennings is kind of the glue receiver in terms of like he gets open and he does the little things right, and he's a complimentary guy, but he's not a guy that can take over games. We saw again multiple explosive times that he was out there, but Pearsall is a little bit better at doing that as well as Ayuk. So again, I think that's what they want to do: get those big plays downfield off the passing game and the running game, play action, and get those shots that Purdy's so well at executing. So I do think, again, we'll have to see how it plays out. But yeah, you want to see Purdy. You want to see reports of Purdy and Pearsall like doing things on the side, getting revved up, getting on the same page. That would be really helpful because Pearsall missed a lot of that time that they could have had in his rookie year. So I think he has some high upside, but again, I think I'm going to cap it right now at wide receiver 3 for Pearsall, which is pretty good. I mean, he was an afterthought, wasn't even in the mix last year, but I think he can bump up from that 48 ranking.
Yeah, when I'm looking at these guys and after wide receiver 24 with the Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, Deebo Samuel, Jerry Jeudy, Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed types, I think I might like Pearsall more than all of those guys. It'd be really close with Jordan Addison and Jameson Williams. But if you had to rank those 3, Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, and Ricky Pearsall, what would be your rankings right now?
Yeah, interesting. I think I would go Addison over the rest and then look at maybe Pearsall over Williams because I'm not sure how that offense is going to operate here in Detroit as we go forward. And we have to also look at, okay, he's the third target on his team as well behind Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's how you have to look at it. I mean, kind of very similar situations where you have another wide receiver and a tight end that can produce like a wide receiver in all those situations. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think we want to see some things develop. Maybe we also pay attention to how McCarthy and Addison are coming along, right? They need to lock in here as we go forward. So these are times of the year, mini camp, training camp, just that's what you're paying attention to. Who's working with whom, who's developing chemistry. So we have that little extra edge and we go there. I mean, I think it developed a little bit last year when we paid attention that, Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin are really feeling it together. And then you saw what happened on the field. So pay attention to those little reports of like who's working with whom, because I think it's going to be big with Purdy, McCarthy, and then we also talked about Harrison. Let's hope that Murray and Harrison are also on the better page here. And these guys all turn into fantasy studs.
Very true. Yes, definitely pay attention to all that. Good points by you. That will be it for today's episode. I want to thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. But for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.